Hey, does your marketing team know about the EU Green Claim Directive? If not, then this podcast episode is going to be very important for you because I'm going to talk to Megan from MTC, who's an absolute expert in marketing, sustainability, and impact communication, and who knows a lot about the new directive. So enjoy this episode. Hi, Megan. And first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. For those of the listeners that don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you currently do?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for asking me to join the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I am Megan, and I am the agency lead and a content marketing strategist at MTC The Content Agency. We are a B2B content agency focused on climate work based in Berlin, Germany. And that's me in a nutshell. But I've been in this industry for over 10 years, loving the content creation process and working with sustainable companies along the way.
Nice. Sounds super interesting. And how did you personally get into the sustainability area? When did you know that you want to do something around marketing, but also with sustainability?
So it was a slow transition for me. When I talk to a lot of people, I think they're all like, this was the aha moment for them. But for me, it was a relatively journey, a transition into this space. I mean, in the very beginning, I went to school for marketing. So I was always in marketing and business. That was where I got my master's in my business degree. But from that time, I actually got involved in nonprofit work. And I'm originally from the United States. So we call them nonprofits and not NGOs. So I guess I always had an interest and affiliation with working with companies that are doing good in the world and making a difference. But when I moved to Germany, because I'm originally from the United States, I kind of left that behind. It's just the kind of the way it is coming to a new country. You kind of have to figure out yourself and where you fit within the job market. So when I came to Germany, I went into SaaS B2B marketing.
Mhm.
And let's just say that was a journey. And
Okay.
and I got through it. And then somewhere along the way, I started working with a sustainability startup and then a sustainability company. And it was just great. I loved the work that they were doing and the impact that they were having, not just on the environmental side, but also the social side and how that all. And when I decided to go into my agency, we evolved in that direction too, because also in the beginning, we were working with a lot of B2B software companies,
Mhm.
but now we're exclusively working with sustainability companies because we really believe that that's where the impact is happening right now.
Mhm. And when you're talking about impact and sustainability companies, like, can you paint a little bit the picture of what that means for your company? Like, what is the impact that you're working on, and what type of sustainability companies are you then working with?
Yep. So for us, it's actually two different pieces. So on kind of the services that we provide content marketing services, but we're always doing it with a sustainable marketing lens. So what that means is we work with climate companies specifically, but we can even work with larger companies that are going into the sustainability messaging type of space. And we work with them on content marketing, but we always are bringing this idea of, are we being compliant with current regulations? Are we being conscious of how we are positioning this, for people on the planet? So that's that piece of it. But when I say impact focus agency, this is kind of the other piece that I'm currently working on as a marketing agency. Because I think in the agency space, up until now, it's always been, driving consumption, driving growth, and helping basically clients to do the same. For an
Mhm.
impact marketing agency, I'm trying to discover what is more for an agency to do good in the world. And for that, that means educating the marketing community on what it means to be an eco marketer or a sustainable marketer, practicing the principles that I just talked about around sustainable marketing. Doing good work, of course, trying to make our agency more sustainable, but also all of those different things from, inside the agency, but also out and having an impact in that way. So those are kind of the impact journey that we're going on currently as an agency and kind of developing that space and what that means.
Mhm. And how is your agency then affected by the new regulations and the new topics coming up? Because they are also affecting the communication and marketing side now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. And so for us as an agency, we're actually quite a small agency. We're only 5 people. We're a micro company.
Hmm.
So when it comes, for example, the EU Green Claims Regulation, it's not directly impacting us because we're relatively small, and it probably will never impact us directly. But how I see it is any agency that wants to work with companies that are doing good or in the sustainability phase, like for example, if I want to work with a corporation that is being affected by this, they could possibly come to their service providers one day and say, "Hey, Megan, have you done any sustainability work within your agency? We need to show and report that as part of our Scope 3 emissions." So
Hmm.
that's kind of where we, even the smaller service providers, at least need to start thinking about, the basics. What is our scope 1, 2, and 3? How are we mitigating that? Have we documented it? All the way to what is the impact work we are. That's like kind of the next step is how to be regenerative, for example, within our company. So I do believe, even though I'm small and a lot of other agencies are, even if you have 50 people, you're turning 1 million in revenue, you're still small.
Hmm.
But if you want to work with these large companies, they're going to start asking us about these things. So it's important to know about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that as for the suppliers, also the sustainability topic gets more and more important because even if just the big companies have like mandatory reportings, this still also trickles down to more companies that need to like make sure that they are in line with some guidelines and actually provide some sustainability data.
Yep.
I would be curious to know, there's now the EU Green Claim Directive, which is also like part of the CSRD or the EU Green Deal in general. Like, do you already see that in companies or maybe let's take a step back. Can you maybe explain to us a little bit, like what is the directive and what is this all about?
Yep. So the EU Green Claim Directive is basically essentially put into force to end the rapid acceleration of greenwashing across the EU, but also remember that it's going to impact the entire world because the EU has such a strong market globally. So that's the ultimate goal is to end greenwashing. And really where it's coming from is, let's say, I think like almost 3 or 4 years ago, the EU sent out a report and they found that 53% of claims that were out there around sustainability were vague, misleading, or unfounded. And then
Mm.
40% of them were unsubstantiated. So they had no verifiable evidence behind them. So that's kind of the statistics underlining the whole green claims initiative. And it makes us realize how rampant greenwashing is actually affecting businesses. And in the end, I think this directive, the whole purpose of it is to protect consumer interest. If we have misleading and unguided claims out there that is leading people to make decisions that are falsely inaccurate, I mean, we have a consumer, we have a problem there, we have humanity problem there. So that's really, I think, the basis behind this regulation. And it's definitely been interesting in how it's evolved. Everything in EU policy evolves slowly, right? But finally, we are getting to the point where we're going to start seeing it in action.
Okay. And from your perspective, have you already or also seen in the past claims that were misleading or were even like going towards greenwashing? And do you believe that the steps taken help us to get more into the right direction, that we see less of greenwashing?
So I see things every day that could be greenwashing, essentially. For example, a part of the regulation is taking away words like eco friendly, sustainable, these very broad and unsubstantiated terms that you really can't prove. We see that all the time, right? Like in Germany, for example, you go and you purchase some laundry detergent and it's probably going to be green and have this beautiful waterfall on it, and then it probably will have these words, but in German, for example. These are things that are already happening and that are misleading consumers. So it's already happening. And I think this regulation is now putting larger corporations under the watchful eye that one, they cannot do this, and two, there is action to be taken against them if they do it. So I do think it's going to have a huge ripple effect across the larger companies first, and then down into the micro enterprises from the top level.
Okay. And can you describe a little bit what effects this will have for companies? Like, what do companies need to do? I already know that, like, with communication, you have to be a little bit careful, but what effects does this have on companies?
So the biggest effect is going to be financially.
Hmm.
I don't have just by the way, anybody listening to this, the European Union has a great now landing page of all this information that you could go and research. But the biggest impact is going to be financial. So if you're a large corporation and you're actually go through the council process and they say, hey, your claim is greenwashing, it's unsubstantiated, you could be looking at a percentage of your annual turnover as a fine for that. So I think the biggest impact is going to be the financial, repercussions of this. So
Hmm. And what would you think are the challenges for companies to be in line with the new directive? Like, what do you think companies will struggle with in order to then actually, yeah, fulfill all of those new regulations?
So this is an interesting question because I think it's can be looked at from a couple different angles. I think what we're already seeing just in the greater sustainability space, because there's a lot of regulations, CSRD, the taxonomy, these things are coming up, and we see things shifting specifically over into, for example, the finance department and the regulatory department. So they're the ones in these large corporations owning this regulation, understanding and advising and taking up. But this regulation directive specifically is still within communication. A lot of this communication is being taken away from marketing. So I think the biggest challenge is reconnecting all the departments and having that inner conversation when there's so much hierarchy and so much division happening with these larger companies, so that marketers understand, one, that there is even a regulation that they should be carried about, that
Hmm.
what that means, like almost having a checklist of the things that they're looking after, and then actually actively getting their sustainable campaigns where they have that type of messaging checked or approved or going through a process before it's even launched out there. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges, is always the conversation, the team interaction, the understanding between the departments, and the supporting of each other. I think a lot of times, for example, I've heard the sustainable team who are actually putting in the sustainable strategy of the company don't like the marketers because the marketers don't understand what the sustainability and the finance, or the finance people, they don't like this other sustainable. So it's like this dynamic that is very interesting for large corporations in general. So this is going to have to be thought of, and I think marketers, communicators specifically, can stand up and take a stance like, hey, this is an important topic, and we're going to educate ourselves. We're going to be knowledgeable about it. We're not going to wait for them to come to us. We're going to start actively doing this. This is the direction I think marketers and communicators and departments need to start making it specifically.
Yeah, I agree that it's a very crucial step that companies within each other have a good communication so that everybody knows what is expected and where they're going. Because I see that, like, the companies that are actually able to manage CSRD and advance on those topics, there's not just a sustainability team that is like almost outsourced that is able to do this, but there are some people working in sustainability and a lot of people supporting that. And I think here it's going to be a similar thing, and it's going to be also quite important to have like a good collaboration.
Yep, absolutely.
In terms of who's going to be affected by the Green Claims Initiative, and then talking about the company level, is this comparable to the CSRD? So could you say, like, companies that have to comply with CSRD also need to care about the Green Claim Directive, or how would you distinguish this?
That's a really good question. So I'm just going to make some assumptions. I don't want anybody to quote me specifically because I'm not a regulation expert. But I think overall, we're all thinking under the same umbrella, right? The EU is pushing the Green Deal and all these overarching regulations. And within that, we have CSRD and we have green claims and everything right next to each other. These all kind of smaller initiatives. So I think if you're worried about CSRD and you're doing the inner sustainability work within your company, it's going to relate to the Green Claims Directive and the fact that whatever messages come out of that CSRD process that you're implementing within your company and making sure that they're viable, which if you're going through the correct process, I hope they are, right?
Mm.
And then having that information transparent and available and communicating it in an effective way. Again, we're talking about inner team dynamics, communicating it to the marketing communication team so that they can communicate about it accurately. And also know where that information is because, marketers love snappy and short phrases. I mean, you can't talk, 3 paragraphs about it, but if you say three words about your sustainability initiatives, you need to be able to link back there. So I think the CSRD and this kind of transformation we have of looking at, the backward and inward of the company and all the different scopes and kind of this more inclusive look at sustainability, which is great. This is going to be a direct effect on how we also communicate because it's going to be supportive of the claims that we communicate.
Mm-hmm. And what about the timeline for the Green Claims Directive? Is there a clear set target? Do you know, or can you tell us a little bit about what are the next steps going on? Are there any deadlines? What timeline need companies to be aware of?
So, in a nutshell, you need to be aware of it now. I don't care if you're a large company, a medium sized company, or a micro company. I think every marketer communicator should be aware of it. When we talk about timeline, like I said earlier, everything with the EU is a slow process. But this process has actually been going on quite a while since 2020. I don't think people realize that. So in March 2020, that is when the proposal was actually initiated. It was put forward by the European Commission. And then from there, we had it go through like a couple different processes, right? And so actually just this year, we're talking January 2024, this is when it was approved, the agreement was approved, and then the council approved it. And then as recent as February, that's when it's like solid, so to say. And now it's being passed on to the countries, right, within the European Union. Because everything starts on EU level, and now it's going to Germany, right? And now Germany has 24 months, 2 years, to get their act together and put it into their own national law. So that's where we are. We're actually quite far down the road, right? Like it's already, if you go to, for example, the landing page that I believe you'll put in the show notes, you'll already see the building blocks of things that you could already be looking out for. What words not to use, these type of things. Because most likely, don't ask me about how national politics works on the but most likely that'll translate down into the national level. So it's definitely something that you could start feeling more confident about. And I think this is really important just to know about because as I saw from a communicator, right when I think it passed March of last year, like basically to the commission, and then it kind of started on that process, there was a lot of PR about it. There was a lot of conversation. But since the beginning of the year, that conversation has kind of dwindled. It's like yesterday news, which I think is very dangerous because now we need to know, okay, this is the final building blocks of what we need to know about this. We need to be educated on it because now it's really happening. It's going to be at our doorstep within 2 years.
Yeah. You already mentioned some checklists and some things where companies can just be aware of what to say or what not to say or where to be careful about. If you were now to talk to a company that is quite new to the process, their marketing has not really been involved in sustainability topics before, like they have communicated about it, but they didn't know about such claims and directives. What would be recommendations that you would give to such a company like how can they start to approach this topic? What is important to consider?
So I think the first way to approach it is just educating. By this point there's quite a lot of good information out there just through a Google search on what it is, what are the basic building blocks of it. I've already mentioned the EU landing page. It's changed the last couple months since this happened in February, and it's like really robust. I was really impressed when I was preparing for this podcast because it's
Mhm,
like this is everything that you need right here on this
mhm.
landing page. So that's the first place that I would definitely start. There's also some really great, for example, you go to YouTube, you type this in, there's some other great podcasts and webinars that have been done. To be honest, I think they're a little bit old now because remember, a lot of things have changed over the last year. So that's the first place to start. The second place to start is I have a lot of resources that I'm going to be sharing with you, and I actually just wrote a newsletter about this that I provide a checklist. So I'll make sure to share that link with you. And in this checklist I have is kind of like a yes or no thing. It's like, are you doing this? Yes. Oh, then you need to do this. Are you doing this? No. Okay, then you're fine. So it's a little bit of kind of a clear checklist based on the current things you should be doing or not be doing, for example, as part of the green claims. Now, overall, I just want to mention that with any of this, I think if you're a large company and you really are worried about the legal effects that I absolutely work with a consultant. You should be working at that level with a sustainable marketing consultant, a sustainability consultant that understands this regulation, who is advising you in such a way to where, okay, what claims, what kind of processes do you need to be putting in your company to make sure that those claims aren't happening? Even having a second pair of eyes on your communication before it goes out, I think is a really beneficial thing. And I'm doing this with my community at a smaller level. Just, having a community of other sustainably minded marketers around you that's saying, hey, I'm sending out this campaign. You understand the regulation. I understand the regulation. Here, let's do a gut check.
Mm.
And that would be, for example, for someone who doesn't have a whole legal team behind them, who could have that type of access to information and people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I also think that, like, just researching, there's a lot of information already on the internet. So, like, looking at all of those contents, then talking to other people is also very crucial. And then I always love those checklists where you can really like go through and already get a good overview. So, yeah, please make sure to send me that, and I can put this into the show notes because I think that would be super helpful. Um, yeah. So in general, like when companies are doing those different steps, like they're researching, they're getting the facts straight, that they know what they need to be careful about, and then they start to implement it. Is there anything else where you see companies struggling with, or is that basically if they do their homework and they get their things together, then they are all set? Or what would you say are other things companies should also be aware of?
So I think the biggest thing that I see companies and marketers specifically struggling with is just the understanding that they're a part of this. They're part of the sustainability movement. I think if I just think about marketers in general, communicators, usually how it's been going is somebody in the sustainability department, if you're lucky, or the sales say, hey, there's this attribute of the product. We want to talk about it. Here's the three things. Do a campaign about it, or work with an agency to do the PR release or whatever. Marketers can no longer be kind of in that position where they're just passing on the information. They need to take a stance. And I think this is the biggest transformation that I'd like to see in my industry specific is marketers being knowledgeable enough and having the courage enough to say, hey, where did you get that 43% of all your recycled material is this or that? I mean, like, where is that coming from? And then standing up and saying, okay, we need to have that piece of evidence for me to actually communicate about that. Where does that come from? That comes from being bold, being brave, but also having the knowledge behind you to back up that. It also takes having a company who believes and be transparent and honest about your communication. So also as marketers, I mean, everybody can't choose what positions and where they could be. You know, we're not all that lucky. But that would be something I start asking in your future position. If you're going to be in a company where they're pushing sustainability claims, then you need to have the backing behind your team and behind leadership to push back if that isn't based on what you think is ethical or not. There needs to be that conversation. There needs to be that mutual understanding. So that I would see as kind of the biggest takeaway. I would love to see marketers and communicators caring more. I would love to see them educating themselves more, and then using the community around them, supporting each other to make sure that we're doing all the sustainable marketing communication ethically and honest and accurate.
I think that's a super nice thought. I would really want to see the market develop more into that direction, that, yeah, we can just empathize this point a little bit more and can be actually like looking at the communication and seeing like, hey, is it in line with the values and what we believe in, and then make sure that this is the right thing.
Yep.
Okay. Those were already all the questions that I had for you. In case you want to mention anything else, like we still have time for that, but other than that, I would just thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I mean, it's a great topic to talk about and to bring awareness to in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. I hope to talk to you soon.
Cool. Oh, really quick, I want to plug
Mhm.
in my newsletter.
Oh, right. Yeah. Let's
Yeah,
do that
so
before we
I
forget
do.
it.
So I do have a sustainable marketing newsletter. So if you're a marketer, communicator, or even like a sustainability manager within your company, a smaller company, and you're looking for just general ongoing help on how to be a sustainable marketer and be more sustainable communication, I have a great newsletter and also YouTube channel where I talk about all these things. So I hope you go and take a look at those two pieces, which I'm sure you'll be providing in the show notes. And I'm always open to having conversations with people. So I'm always available on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that. I also will have a look at your YouTube channel because I also have the YouTube channel for myself, so I'm very interested in the topic. And B, I'm also like doing a lot of content marketing, and for us as well, sustainability is super important. So we'll definitely make sure to check that out.
Of course. Thank you so much.